I never pictured my own daughter leaving me out in the cold. I never thought the man she chose to marry would humiliate me at my weakest point, and that she would stand by and let it happen. What they didn't realize was that life had one more move in store for me. And when that card was played, everything shifted. So buckle up, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a reckoning. Drop a comment with where you're tuning in from, and remember to subscribe if you want more stories like this. My name is Margaret, I'm 58, and up until recently, I truly believed in something called unconditional love, especially when it came to family. My world revolved around my husband and our daughter, Amanda. Every meal I prepared, every holiday I organized, every dollar I set aside, it was all for them. When cancer claimed my husband last year, it felt like the ground gave way beneath my feet. Still, I told myself, I have Amanda. I still have my daughter. I sold the home my husband and I had built in Cedar Park, just north of Austin. Too many memories, too many nights waking up expecting to hear his voice calling from the kitchen. Amanda and her husband, Chad, offered me a place to stay. Well, Amanda did. Chad barely glanced up from his phone when I arrived. I tried my best not to intrude. I kept to the small room in the back, cooked, cleaned, offered to run errands, anything to stay useful and out of the way. But Chad had this knack for making me feel like a burden. The way his eyes narrowed, like I was an irritant he couldn't shake. It started small. An eye roll if I asked something. Switching the TV when I was in the middle of a show. Once, I heard him mutter "freeloader" under his breath as he passed me in the hall. I wanted to believe I misheard. But deep down I knew. Amanda. She brushed it aside. I'd look to her for some kind of defense, a word, a look, anything. But all she said was, "He's just stressed. Work's been hard." So I swallowed my shame and kept quiet. That's what mothers do, right? But then came the night that broke me. Dinner table. I had made chicken pot pie, his favorite. Amanda scrolled her phone. Chad nursed a beer. The silence was thick. Then suddenly he looked up and said, "Maybe it's time we stop pretending this is temporary. We're not a charity." Amanda froze. I stared at him. "What do you mean?" I asked. He smirked. "I mean, how long does this go on? You're not working. You're not pitching in. We've got bills. We didn't sign up to feed another mouth." My chest tightened, my heart pounded. I turned to Amanda, desperate. But she wouldn't even look at me. "Maybe it's best," she mumbled, "if you find something more stable. For everyone's sake." I didn't shout. I didn't fight. I stood, walked to my room, packed 2 suitcases, the scraps of a life, and left. Not a tear while packing. The tears came later, when I stood outside their building with the wind cutting through my coat, realizing I had nowhere to go. Amanda didn't walk me out. Chad didn't bother to hide his relief. I sat on the curb for an hour, phone battery dead, heart just as empty. So this is what it feels like to be erased, I thought. That night, I checked into a rundown motel, the kind with peeling wallpaper and vending machines that steal your coins. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, asking myself how everything turned so cold, wondering what crime I had committed to deserve this. The next morning, I texted Amanda, "I understand. I love you always." No reply. The next week, I sent another. And another. Birthdays. Little updates. Silence. 3 months crawled by, each day heavier than the last. I tried for jobs, anything, but no one wanted to hire a grieving widow in her late 50s with no recent work history. I thought about cleaning houses, babysitting, but my body didn't cooperate the way it once did. The loneliness suffocated me. Worse still, the shame. I had poured everything into that girl. How could she discard me so easily? One evening, I dug through a box of family keepsakes, desperate to feel tethered to something, anything. And there it was, my mother's old diary. I hadn't opened it in years, maybe never. But something urged me to turn the pages. And that's when I discovered it, A name, a truth, a secret. It turned my whole world upside down. I remember that instant as if it were carved into me. My hands shook, my pulse raced. Suddenly, I wasn't just the discarded mother left on the curb. I was someone entirely different. For the first time in months, I felt a smile tug at my face. They thought they had stripped me of everything, but they had no idea what was about to unfold. After that night, the days melted together, like dull gray paint bleeding across wet paper. The motel reeked of stale air and distant cigarette smoke. The vending machine outside my door buzzed endlessly, a lullaby of surrender. I stayed quiet. I didn't weep every night, but when I did, it was the silent kind, the kind that shakes your whole body, but you muffle it, because you know no one is coming to comfort you. On the fourth day, I texted Amanda, "I'm okay. Just wanted to check how you are." No reply. 2 weeks later, I tried again. Just a heart emoji. Nothing. I kept telling myself she was busy, that Chad must be twisting things, that she would come around. But week after week, that hope inside me began to decay. Money was running low. I applied for part-time jobs, grocery stores, front desks, even a greasy diner by the highway, but I was always either overqualified or not the right fit. Which, let's be honest, is code for too old, too broken. One night, I sat cross-legged on the floor, going through the only non-clothing box I had brought with me. A dusty memory box. Old photos. Letters. And at the very bottom, a small leather-bound book. My mother's diary. I didn't even remember packing it. Almost put it back. But something in the worn leather called to me. I switched on the dim lamp by the bed and opened to the first page. Her handwriting was the same as the notes she used to sneak into my lunchbox as a child. Neat, looping, always ink. At first, it was simple. Weather. Church gossip. Complaints about rising grocery prices. Then came the entry dated June. He came again today. Said he wished life were different. Said he wished I could be his wife. But he has a family, a business, a name to protect. Margaret must never know. She must never know. I only pray that one day she understands how much I love her, even if she was born out of mistake and desire. I read it twice. Then again. She must never know. My chest tightened. I flipped ahead. Entry after entry, veiled hints, stolen meetings in hotel rooms, envelopes of money she tried not to take but desperately needed. She never wrote his full name, only the initials. HJS. Then another entry, February. He told me he made arrangements. If anything happens to him, he'll make sure Margaret is provided for. It won't be official, too dangerous, but he promised a trust, a letter. He said his lawyer, Mr. Goldstein, would know. Goldstein. The name hit me like a blow. I'd seen it before. It took me 2 days of shaky hands and borrowed time on the motel's shared computer, but I found him. Leonard Goldstein. Retired estate lawyer, still quietly listed with a private firm in Dallas. I couldn't bring myself to call. My nerves wouldn't let me. Instead, I wrote. A real letter, pen to paper, pouring out who I was, who my mother was, and begging for a meeting. 2 weeks later, the phone rang. The tremor in his voice when I spoke my mother's name told me everything. He had known her. Not just professionally. Personally. I always wondered if you'd reach out one day, he said. There's something you need to see. The next morning, I boarded a Greyhound to Dallas, suitcase half-packed in case it was all some cruel scam. But the moment I stepped into that quiet office, lined with dusty books and the kind of silence that felt heavy with history, I knew it was real. He handed me a fragile, sealed envelope, yellowed with time. From Harold James Sterling, founder of Sterling Energy, one of the most powerful oil men in Central Texas. A name I'd seen in headlines, a man with a dynasty. A man with a family and a legacy to protect. The letter was addressed to my daughter, Margaret Louise. I couldn't read it all in one sitting. I broke down before I reached the second paragraph. He confessed everything, the affair, the regret, the love he never spoke aloud. And then the promise. In the event of my passing, I have insured a portion of my personal assets, untraceable through my estate, will be given to you through Mr. Goldstein. You are my blood. And though I lacked the courage to claim you in life, I claim you now, in death. Mr. Goldstein slid a folder across the desk. Inside, bank accounts, investments, proof, portfolio documents, ownership papers, titles. The total worth, just over $1 million. I stared at the stack, then at him. This is real, I whispered. He nodded. It's yours. Always was. My heart hammered, not because of the money, but because for the first time in my life, I felt chosen. Seen. I didn't scream, or laugh, or collapse. I just sat still, letting the truth pour over me like long-awaited rain. That night in my motel room, I didn't sleep. Like so many nights before, I stared at the ceiling. But this time, there was a smile tugging at my lips. They thought they'd cast me aside. They thought I was done. They had no idea. I wasn't broken. I was only just beginning. I didn't rush back to Austin. Something inside me had shifted permanently. I wasn't just Margaret, the discarded mother. I was someone else now. Someone who had lived her whole life under a lie and finally saw the truth. For the first time in years, I wasn't suffocating in shame, I was breathing clarity. I lingered in Dallas for a few more days. I walked through quiet neighborhoods, sipped coffee at little cafes, watched strangers go about their lives. But instead of envying them, I studied them, wondering which of their smiles hid betrayal. Which of them had been erased and clawed their way back. Leonard Goldstein hadn't just handed me an inheritance. He had given me something far more valuable. Time. Time to process. Time to realize what I held. It wasn't only wealth. It was leverage. It was freedom. I didn't know yet what to do with it. But I knew one thing. Humiliation burns itself into fuel. And I was ready to burn. When I returned to Austin, I didn't crawl back to that motel. I rented a short-term place downtown. Modern, clean, quiet. The kind of apartment Amanda and Chad would never picture me affording. I changed my wardrobe, subtle, sharper, more deliberate. Not flashy, just calculated. A kind of invisibility that opened doors instead of closing them. I spent hours on YouTube, learning investment basics, real estate contracts, the language of business. Not because I dreamed of empire, but because I would never let myself be powerless again. And then, I found it. Buried on a real estate auction site. A rundown apartment complex in East Austin. Structurally sound. Perfect location. My eyes froze when I saw the address. It was their building. Amanda and Chad's building. My pulse thundered. It was flagged as distressed. The owner had defaulted on property taxes. Auction in 2 weeks. I didn't hesitate. With Mr. Goldstein's guidance, I created an LLC, an anonymous shell. I filed the paperwork, transferred the funds, and placed the bid. It wasn't revenge. Not exactly. It was reclamation. Taking control of the place they thought they ruled. The auction came and went. I won. Quietly. Legally. Entirely under the radar. And just like that, I owned the very building where they had thrown me out with 2 suitcases and no dignity. I remember sitting at the desk, holding the deed in my hands, whispering, "Let's see how Chad likes paying rent to the mouth he couldn't feed." A month later, the notices went out. Tenants informed of reassessments. Leases revised. And for Amanda and Chad? Their rent tripled. Not doubled. Tripled. Plus overdue fees. I didn't have to see Chad's face to know. He must have erupted. His control shattered. 2 days later, Amanda called me. For the first time since the night I left. I let it go to voicemail. "Mom, I don't know if you've heard, but something weird's happening. Our rent just skyrocketed. Chad's losing it. I don't know. Can we talk?" I didn't answer. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about weight. About consequence. One night, I drove past the building. Their lights glowed. Shadows flickered behind curtains. Amanda pacing. Chad's silhouette barking, beer in hand. I watched for a moment, then drove on. Hollow. Vindicated. Shattered. All at once. Because even then, knowing what I knew, holding what I held, I would have given anything to be welcomed back. Not into their apartment, but into my daughter's heart. But that wasn't possible. Not yet. So I stayed silent. I waited. Because sometimes the loudest justice is the kind that says nothing at all. And I wasn't finished. I didn't realize how much I had transformed until 3 weeks later, in a grocery store. I saw Amanda. She didn't notice me. I was 2 aisles away. 2 aisles over, hidden behind a rack of discount cereal, I spotted her. Amanda. She looked worn. Not just tired, drained. Her hair was tied back haphazardly, the way she used to when she'd been crying. Her cart was nearly empty, just rice, eggs, a few off-brand cans. I should have turned and walked away. I didn't. I trailed her at a distance, heart thudding like I was committing some kind of crime. She paused at a box of macaroni and cheese, picked it up, then stared down at her phone. A text from Chad, maybe. Her shoulders slumped. She put the box back. That moment cracked me, not because I pitied her, but because I remembered the little girl who once ran to me with skinned knees, who begged me to check for monsters under her bed. And now, she was living with one. I drove home that day and sat in silence for hours, staring out the window, wondering how life twisted us into strangers. But I reminded myself, this wasn't punishment. This was consequence. And consequence was long overdue. I had plans now. Not just the building, but a slow, deliberate chess game. Every move calculated. Every step intentional. With the LLC in full operation and the property legally mine, I started with small repairs. Leaks, broken locks, flickering bulbs. Things Chad never noticed, too consumed with the rent hike, firing off angry emails to the property manager. He demanded answers, but I knew him too well. He'd never leave. He'd see moving as surrender. And Amanda? She would trail behind him, as always. So I pressed forward. New signage for the property. Security cameras installed. Updated tenant mailboxes. All under the name ML Holdings. Margaret Louise. Nobody knew who sat behind it. Then came the notice. Mandatory annual inspections. Chad fired back with a furious tenant portal message, overflowing with threats and bluster. I smiled as I read it. He was unraveling, and I didn't need to lift a finger. Meanwhile, I was evolving into someone unfamiliar. I wore my hair sharper, dressed with intention. I walked differently now, head high, stride steady. I joined small business meetups under a different name, quietly building a network. No one asked about my past. They only saw a poised woman with quiet confidence and money to move. Sometimes, the best disguise is simply the truth left unspoken. One morning, I walked out of a tenant meeting, documents in hand, sunglasses hiding my eyes, hair pinned in a neat bun. I passed Amanda and Chad in the parking lot. Amanda barely glanced my way. Chad didn't recognize me at all. That night, sipping tea in my apartment, I thought about the strangeness of it all. To walk right past your own child and be invisible. But not invisible because you're powerless. Invisible because you've grown stronger than the version of yourself they remember. The woman they once dismissed no longer existed. The voicemails from Amanda continued. Gentle. Tentative. Hi, Mom. Just wanted to see if maybe we could talk. I know things have been complicated. I didn't call back. Not out of cruelty, but because she needed to feel the silence she had left me in. And every time doubt crept in, I reopened my mother's diary. I read those words again and again. Margaret must never know. She must never know. But I did know now. And that knowledge became my armor. I wasn't the woman begging for space under their roof anymore. I was the woman who owned it. I had always believed revenge wasn't about payback, it was about equilibrium. Balance. A quiet correction, not a war. But when Chad's email landed in my inbox after the rent hike notice, I'll admit, a spark of satisfaction flickered. Subject: rent increase. This is outrageous. This has to be a mistake. Tripling rent? That's extortion. I demand to speak directly to the landlord. We've lived here for 3 years and never missed a payment. This is theft. Chad D. Harmon. He signed it like his name carried weight. I read the message 3 times. Then forwarded it to my property manager with a single note. Respond using standard clause C regarding market rate adjustments. No exceptions. Chad wasn't just angry. He was stunned. His ego had never considered the possibility of being outmaneuvered. He had lived too long believing he held the upper hand. The idea of answering to an unseen landlord gnawed at him. That same night, Amanda called again. This voicemail was different. No pretense. Just, "Mom, I know you're not answering, but I need to talk. Things are rough." Chad's furious. He's lashing out at everything. We're trying to hold it together, but I miss you. I do. Her voice cracked on the voicemail. For a brief moment, my fingers hovered over the screen. I could have called back, could have told her it would all be okay. But it wasn't okay. And I couldn't keep patching over the wreckage she helped create. Amanda had stood silent while he tossed me out like I was just another bill they couldn't pay. And now, with pressure closing in, she remembered my number. No. Let her sit with the silence. The following week, I approved more upgrades on the property. Fresh paint for the exterior, brighter hallways, new landscaping. Every dollar from Chad's inflated rent went straight back into improvements for tenants who appreciated them. That was the irony. Everyone else benefited. He just couldn't see it. Chad began sliding angry notes under the office door. Water pressure's awful. Trash isn't being collected. For what we're paying, this is robbery. Each note went unanswered. Amanda's calls slowed, replaced by short texts. "Hey, can we talk?" Then nothing. Meanwhile, ML Holdings thrived. The building was stable, profitable. The tenants respectful. Bills paid on time. The only chaos came from Chad, and Amanda, trapped in his wake. Things shifted when the quarterly report arrived. Attached were photos of their unit. Mildew spreading in the bathroom, cracked tiles in the kitchen, unopened mail scattered on the floor. They were cutting corners, slipping further behind. I should have felt pity. Instead, I felt clarity. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about control, and Chad was losing his grip. Word spread that he'd taken extra shifts. A tenant mentioned seeing Amanda crying on the back steps one afternoon. They were unraveling, piece by piece. And I hadn't lifted a finger. For so long, I was the one begging to be heard. Begging Amanda to see who Chad really was. Now the silence was choking them, and I was watching from above. Literally. My new apartment, in a different complex, overlooked their courtyard. Higher floor. Safer neighborhood. A view they would never afford. I didn't spy often. Just enough to remind myself I hadn't imagined their betrayal. That the consequences they were drowning in were real, and earned. And yet, despite everything, there were nights I sat at my window, phone in hand, staring at Amanda's last message. "I really need you." The mother in me ached. But the woman I had become knew this was only the beginning. I used to think heartbreak was loud. Slammed doors, shouted fights, public scenes. But the real heartbreak is quiet. It's a voicemail you don't return. A message left unread. The silence between you and someone who once called you, Mommy. Amanda's attempts slowed. The texts came less often. And from what I heard through staff, the damage only deepened. The tension inside that apartment had turned poisonous. Chad snapped at neighbors, refused basic maintenance, demanded pointless inspections, always searching for someone to blame. Amanda looked exhausted, worn thin, shadows under her eyes. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile at their pain. Because this wasn't about watching them suffer. It was about something far heavier, watching my daughter cling to a cage and call it love. Then came the report from my manager, another complaint. Yelling late at night. A neighbor overheard Chad shouting, "This is all your fault. I've lost control." Then the sound of a door slamming. He didn't return until morning. Amanda stayed locked inside, curtains drawn, lights out. I waited. Not for him, for her. 2 more days passed. 2 long, aching days. And then, just as the sun sank behind the trees, my building's intercom buzzed. "Hi. This is Amanda Harmon. I was wondering if Margaret, my mom, lives here." My heart stopped. I didn't answer immediately. I just sat frozen, staring at the screen. Then slowly, I pressed the door release. 10 minutes later, a soft knock at my apartment door. When I opened it, she stood there. A shadow of the girl I raised. Pale, makeup smeared, shirt wrinkled. She looked 20 years older than her age. We locked eyes. We stood there, eyes locked, neither of us speaking. Finally, she exhaled. "Hi, Mom." I stepped aside. She entered cautiously, as if unsure she was allowed. The room was quiet, save for the clink of porcelain as I poured 2 cups of tea. I didn't ask why she came. I didn't ask how she was. I simply handed her the mug, sat across from her, and waited. "I don't even know where to begin," she whispered. I stayed silent. "Chad's not easy. He's angry all the time. Blames the rent. Blames me. Blames the dog next door, for God's sake." She glanced down. "I thought I was doing the right thing when we asked you to leave." She winced at the word asked, as if it disguised what really happened. "I wanted peace. Less conflict. Chad told me you'd never go unless we forced you. And God, I hate myself for agreeing." I lifted the cup to my lips. "I miss you," she breathed, "but I don't know how to fix this." Her face trembled under the weight of it, searching mine for forgiveness she didn't dare ask outright. All I gave her was silence. Because sometimes, silence is safer than truth. We sat like that nearly an hour. She didn't ask for money. Didn't beg for help. She just wanted to sit near me. And I let her. When she finally rose, she reached for my hand. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "For everything." I didn't say it back. I only held her hand longer than she expected. She was the one who pulled away first. Tears pooled in her eyes as she left, the door clicking shut behind her. I didn't cry, but I collapsed into my chair, clutching her warm teacup as if it were a lifeline. She had come. She had looked me in the eye. And now I knew. The cracks were showing. The thing about real power is this. You don't need to scream it. You don't slam doors. You don't hurl threats. You tug one string here, close one door there, and watch those who underestimated you squirm. And Chad, he was squirming. After Amanda's visit, the darkness in their apartment deepened. I didn't need cameras to sense it. You can feel a household breaking if you pay attention. The maintenance crew told me Chad had gone unhinged, storming into the office twice a week, demanding to know who owned the building. He wanted names. A face. Someone to blame. The absence of one drove him mad. He started digging. Of course he did. Chad never accepted defeat quietly. I'd seen it before, the way he scrolled through Amanda's phone if she lingered too long at the store, the way he counted her receipts, questioned her errands. Possessive didn't cover it. So when he began sniffing around for ML Holdings, I was ready. He tried public records, but my lawyer had filed through a privacy trust. No names. No trail. Then came phishing emails to my manager, pretending to be tenants fishing for the landlord's identity. Clumsy. Desperate. He even phoned the title office, posing as an attorney. They flagged him and reported it immediately. When those attempts failed, he turned inward. I don't know what happened exactly, but a neighbor called in a noise complaint. Glass breaking, voices raised. Not the sound of bills. It was the sound of fear. The maintenance man knocked. No answer. Through the door, he heard Chad pacing, muttering, Amanda sobbing. The silence that followed was heavier than the shouting. A few days later, an unmarked envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address. Inside, a note. I know what you're doing. You think you're clever, but you don't scare me. I'll find out who you are. And when I do, you'll regret it. No signature. But I knew the handwriting. Angry. Uneven. Pressing too hard on the paper. Chad. I sat holding the letter, my heart pounding. Not with fear, but with memory. Back to that night at the kitchen table, when he looked at me like I was less than dirt. And Amanda stood at his side. Silent. Complicit. Now he was the one gasping at shadows. Suffocating on uncertainty. Screaming into the void. Poetic. But dangerous. So I reinforced my defenses. My lawyer worked with building security. More cameras. More oversight. Legal. Discreet. I made sure tenants were safe. This building wouldn't collapse just because one man couldn't shoulder the weight of his cruelty. And Amanda? She didn't call again. But word traveled. She was walking to work now, her car sold. Utilities being cut. The walls of their life crumbling inward. Lights out by 9. No heat some nights. The cracks weren't only in their marriage, they were in their survival. And yet, through it all, I kept my distance. Because this was never about revenge. It was about resolution. Letting Chad's little kingdom shrink until he finally saw how small he really was. And letting Amanda decide, would she keep the cage, or reach for the key I'd left waiting. I knew she wasn't ready. Not yet. But the walls were closing in. And secrets, they always find a way through the cracks. I didn't expect the knock that evening. Days had gone by, no updates from management, no texts from Amanda, no threats in the mail. Only silence. The kind that hangs like a storm on the horizon. But when the knock finally came, soft and uneven, something inside me clenched. I opened the door. Amanda stood there, drenched in rain, clutching a grocery bag like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her eyes were swollen, lips trembling. She opened her mouth, but no words came. It was as if language had run dry days ago. I stepped aside. She slipped in, dripping water across the floor. I handed her a towel, and we moved without speaking. The kettle whistled, 2 cups of chamomile poured. She perched on the edge of the couch, as though she didn't belong. As though she didn't deserve to. Finally, she whispered, "He's not who I thought he was." I said nothing. I mean, deep down I knew. But I told myself it was stress. That he just needed patience. That if I held on, he'd come around. Her voice shook. But it's worse now. He thinks someone's targeting us. He's obsessed. Checks my phone. My email. Last week he followed me to work, said he was making sure I wasn't part of it. A chill ran down her spine, and mine. He even asked if I was hiding something. Or if you were hiding something. I froze. She rushed on. I told him I hadn't spoken to you. That I didn't know where you were. She paused, then lowered her eyes. But that was a lie. I figured it out. The building. Same management company. I found your name buried in a notice. It wasn't hard. Of course it wasn't. Amanda had always been sharp. But sharp doesn't always mean brave. And now, she looked like someone staring at the truth and despising it. I miss you, she whispered. But I don't even know how to stand in front of you anymore. My grip tightened around the mug. You left, she said, voice breaking. And I let you. I let him shove you out. Finally, I spoke. No, Amanda. You didn't let him. You stood beside him. Her breath caught. She blinked, lips parting like she wanted to deny it. Defend herself. But there was nothing left to defend. I rose, walked to the window. That night, I begged for your voice. Just one word. And you stayed silent. Behind me, I heard her exhale, a sound both hollow and broken. I didn't think it would get this bad, she said. I thought I could manage him. You don't manage men like him, I replied softly. You survive them. Or you leave. No answer. None was needed. We sat in silence, two women bound by blood but severed by trust. Not yet reconciled. Maybe never. When she finally stood, she placed the mug down gently. Her eyes brimmed with tears she refused to let fall. I don't expect forgiveness. I needed to remember what it felt like to be safe. I walked her to the door. She paused, then suddenly wrapped her arms around me. I didn't return it at first. Then, slowly, I did, cautious, fragile, like holding a memory you're terrified might slip away. She pulled back without a word. Just one last glance. And then she left. When the door clicked shut, something shifted in my chest. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But the faint flicker of something that could grow, if she allowed it. The invitation went out the following Tuesday. Simple. Professional. No theatrics. Tenant meeting. Building renovations. Mandatory attendance. I knew Chad would come. He couldn't resist. He craved a name, a face, someone to aim his rage at. He had no idea he was about to walk straight into the hands of the woman he discarded like garbage. On the day of the meeting, I arrived early. Charcoal blazer. Dark jeans. Understated. Polished. My hair brushed into soft waves. I looked nothing like the woman who once sat at Amanda's kitchen table, begging for dignity. The common room began to fill. The tenants filed in, some curious, some irritated, most indifferent. And then came Chad. He stormed through the door with the swagger of a man spoiling for a fight, Amanda trailing behind him like a shadow. His eyes didn't scan the room. They locked straight onto the property manager. "Where is she?" he barked. "I want the person in charge. Today." The manager remained composed. "All questions will be addressed during the presentation." Chad scoffed. Amanda kept her gaze pinned to her shoes. I sat near the back. Silent. The meeting began. Routine updates. Timelines. Upgrades. The new security system. Fresh landscaping. Improved insulation. All smart, practical changes. All paid for in part by the very rent Chad had cursed. Then the manager paused. "We'd like to thank ML Holdings for their dedication to revitalizing the property and ensuring tenant comfort. The owner is here today, should anyone have questions." I stood. The room stilled. Step by step, I walked toward the front. Calm. Steady. Every footfall like a quiet drumbeat. Chad's expression contorted, from confusion, to disbelief, to fury. Amanda's mouth fell open. I turned to the room. "Good evening. My name is Margaret. I'm the owner of this building." You could have heard a pin drop. Chad shot up so fast his chair screeched across the floor. This is a joke. Some twisted game." I looked at him, really looked. Saw the sweat at his collar, the puffiness under his eyes, the cracks behind his bravado. "No game," I said softly. "Just business." He lunged a step closer. "You orchestrated this. You've been behind it all. The rent, the notices. You're trying to destroy us." I didn't flinch. "I gave you a roof. I invested in this property. I treated every tenant the same. What I didn't do was forget." His mouth opened to fire back, but I turned to the group instead. If anyone has questions about the renovations or upcoming improvements, I'll gladly answer them after the meeting. Thank you. I stepped aside. The presentation resumed. But the air never lightened. Chad remained standing, trembling with rage. Amanda sat rigid, her hands knotted together, eyes wet and wide. When the meeting ended, tenants filtered toward me, shaking hands, asking questions, thanking me. Some had suspected. Most had no idea. Chad waited until the room was nearly empty. Then he marched up, his voice low and venomous. You think you've won? This is nothing. You've just made yourself an enemy. I held his stare. No, Chad. I didn't make anything. You did. The moment you looked me in the eye and treated me like I was nothing. Amanda stepped between us. Chad. Stop. He blinked at her, stunned. What did you just? I said stop. Her voice rose, steady now. She's not your enemy. She never was. You are. The blow landed harder than any slap. He recoiled. Amanda turned to me, voice shaking. I didn't know. About the building, the money. Any of it. I know, I said gently. Then why didn't you tell me? Because you had to see it. Not just hear it. Tears pooled in her eyes. Chad sneered, stepping back. You two deserve each other. No, I answered quietly. She deserves better. And then I walked away. For the first time since that night in their kitchen, I felt it. Something steady and real. Not revenge. Not gloating. Power. Quiet. Firm. Mine. 4 days later, Amanda appeared at my door again. This time, holding something that nearly dropped me to my knees. A weathered leather book, its corners frayed, its spine weak. My mother's diary. I opened the door without a word. She stepped inside, eyes wide, breath uneven. I found it in my closet, she said. Last time I visited. You must have left it. I wasn't trying to pry, I swear. But I saw the handwriting. I read it. She set the diary on the table. Reverent. I didn't know about Harold Sterling, she whispered. Or the trust. Or any of it. I nodded slowly. I didn't either. Not until everything else was gone. Her voice cracked. Mom, why didn't you tell me? Why let me think you were helpless? I looked at her, and for once she didn't look away. Because I was. The night you shut the door on me, I had nothing. No plan. No money. Not even a place to cry without someone telling me to be quiet. That diary, it saved me. It told me I mattered. That my mother loved me enough to fight for me in silence. Amanda sank into the chair, fists tightening in her lap. I don't know how I became the kind of daughter who could do what I did. I keep asking myself that, over and over. I walked to the window, staring down at the quiet street below, life humming along as if nothing had shifted. You didn't become her overnight, I said softly. It was small choices. Letting things slide. Choosing peace over truth. Believing loyalty was love, even when it hurt. Amanda stood, stepped closer. I've left him. The words landed like an explosion. He tried going through my things again. My laptop, my bag. I told him no. That was it. He screamed, packed a bag, stormed out. Said he'd be back. I changed the locks the next day. I turned, stunned. I don't know who I am without him, she admitted, her voice shaking. But I'd rather find out than keep disappearing. Silence fell, heavy, full of all the things we hadn't said. Then her eyes dropped to the diary. You didn't deserve what I did. What we did. I can't undo it. But I want to try. I moved back toward her, lowered myself beside her on the couch. I used to dream about hearing those words, I told her. But when you say them now, they don't erase the past. They rewrite it. She frowned, unsure. I held her hand gently. You see me now. That changes everything. We sat together a long while. A silence not sharp, but soothing. The kind that comes only after truth finally finds a voice. Before she left, Amanda paused at the door. "You didn't raise me to be weak," she said. "I just forgot how strong you were." I smiled faintly. "No, you didn't forget. You just stopped looking." And now, at last, she was looking. Seeing me, not just who I'd become, but who I'd always been. Then the email came. The subject line made my stomach twist. "We need to talk now. Chad." I opened it carefully. His words spilled out, jagged, frantic. "I know everything. About the building. The inheritance. Your dirty little secret with Sterling. You think you're clever, that you can ruin me and get away with it. If you don't undo this, I'll go public. The press. Your mother's affair. Everything. Let's see how your reputation holds up when they know where you really came from." For a moment, I just stared. He had pieced it together, whether through Amanda or his own desperation. But I wasn't afraid. Because I had been waiting for this since the day I signed the deed. I forwarded the email to my lawyer. By the next morning, Chad received a cease and desist. Attached were files, every threatening note he'd left, the forged documents he tried to push through under a fake firm, the phishing emails traced back to his own IP, tenant complaints, maintenance sabotage logs, even audio recordings of his public tirades. We didn't need criminal charges. One lawsuit for harassment and defamation was enough. And he panicked. I knew because Amanda called 2 days later. "He's gone," she said, voice trembling. "Packed up while I was at work. Left a note, said he's being hunted. Said you ruined his life." "He ruined his own," I said quietly. Silence on the line. Then Amanda whispered, "I'm sorry. For ever believing he deserved my silence." "You were scared," I told her. "I've been there. Fear makes you small. But you don't have to stay that way." Chad's attempts at retaliation came soon after, cryptic rants online about betrayal and corruption. But he never used names. He couldn't afford to, not after my attorney sent a second letter threatening legal action for every word. Publicly, he went quiet. Privately, I knew he would never forget the day he realized the woman he tossed out with 2 suitcases and a hollow stare now owned the roof over his head, the lease in his name, and the keys to every locked door he once slammed. Amanda, on the other hand, was transforming. Within a month, she left the unit for good, found a small studio near her job, started therapy, enrolled in an art class. One day, she brought me a painting, an abstract phoenix, all reds and golds. I hung it above my fireplace. We spoke more often now. Not every day. But when we did, it was honest. No more pretending. The last piece of the puzzle was still missing. The last piece of the puzzle arrived in an envelope, another letter from Mr. Goldstein. "Congratulations, Margaret. The transfer is complete. All tenants have signed. The case against Mr. Harmon has been settled in your favor. You are free to sell, hold, or restructure the property as you see fit." I folded the letter carefully, pressed it to my chest. This wasn't about money. Not about bricks and deeds. Not even about revenge. It was about truth. About reclaiming my name, my story, my strength. The next morning, I called a realtor. It was time. Time to close that chapter and open a door into a life I didn't just endure, but finally lived on my own terms. By late spring, the sale was complete. On a clear Tuesday morning, with nothing more dramatic than a signature and a handshake, the weight of 3 years, loss, betrayal, silence, lifted from my shoulders. The funds cleared the following day. But I didn't celebrate. Instead, I wrote a check. A large one. Half the proceeds went to a shelter for women and children, the kind of place I wished I'd known existed the night I stood outside, suitcases at my feet, with nowhere to go. I asked them to build a new wing in my mother's name, the Eleanor House. A tribute to the woman who gave me strength in silence, who hid her truth so that one day I could discover mine. The other half, I used to buy a small home. Nothing extravagant, a modest 2-bedroom in Cedar Park, shaded by old oak trees. A porch swing out front. Enough room for quiet. For healing. For maybe a garden if I ever felt like planting one. Amanda helped me move in. We didn't talk much as we carried boxes, but when it was done, we sat side by side on the porch swing. I remember riding my bike down this street, she murmured. Before everything got complicated. You were always safe here, I told her. She nodded. I forgot how that felt. We didn't mention Chad. We didn't need to. His story had ended quietly. No dramatic outburst. No final showdown. Just silence. He vanished into another city, another job, another lie. Not before signing an NDA. Not before letting his threats dissolve into nothing. A ghost. Nothing more. Amanda stayed for dinner. We made grilled cheese and tomato soup, like when she was little. She laughed when she burned a sandwich. I laughed when she tried to blame the pan. It was the first real laughter we'd shared in years. That night, after she left, I stood at the window with a cup of tea warming my hands. Moonlight stretched across the yard. And for the first time in forever, I whispered the words out loud. I forgive you. Not to Amanda. To myself. Because that was the hardest part. Not surviving the fire. But realizing I had never been the ashes. They had only mistaken me for them. They tried to smother me with silence. I learned to wield it instead. They tried to erase me. I became unforgettable. I sat on the couch, opened my mother's diary one last time, and slipped a note between the pages for Amanda to discover someday. You don't need their love to be worthy. You don't need their approval to be strong. You only need the truth. And to never ever forget who you are. The clock ticked softly. My tea cooled in my hands. But my heart, it was warm. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to conquer. I just needed to be who I always was. And finally, I was home. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you feel ready, share your story in the comments. Because your voice matters.